two curious sisters, one family secret, and a world of ancient promises. Sisters Eleanor and Mike know the rules of the house. They can't talk about house magic, and when their parents begin to argue, they have to hide under the bed until the voices die down. While they wait, they whisper stories back and forth. Scary stories. Stories filled with magic. Stories where their real parents come to save them. This is how they stay safe. But when their father lashes out and breaks their witch ball, the house magic stops working, and then a river appears under Eleanor's bed, a river that leads to another world. What secrets lurk in this Riverland? And are Mike and Eleanor strong enough to escape its pull? Or will they get swept away by its power? Here is a preview of Riverland by Fran, Wilde. Some days my sister and I could sense trouble coming. Other days, like the weather, it caught us by surprise. Today, from up the hill where the school bus dropped us off, our house looked trouble-free, safe. Mama had been busy. The blue clapboard box with its wooden shutters anchored our cul-de-sac like it had been on Riverland Road forever, which it pretty much had. Mike's small purple bicycle leaned on my larger blue one in the shade of the garage. Our lawn, smooth all the way to the shoreline and carefully cleared of leaves, wrapped the house like arms with hands clasped at the pale concrete driveway. Everything seemed perfect. Better than perfect, the house didn't look magicked at all. But today still felt like trouble. That's why I wasn't in a rush to go home. If I was lucky, Pendra would invite me over. Her house was closer to our bus stop. I formed the beginning of a wish. To be honest, it was more of a spell in my mind. A spell that would turn Pendra toward her house, not mine. 2 words, please, Pen. But Pendra Sardi had other ideas. She was looking down the hill, too. We always go to my house, she said, like she'd read my mind. We haven't been to yours since summer. You always have some excuse. And you still have my book. We'll get it, and then we can sit on the dock and work on our science posters until the rain comes. As the bus, empty now, rolled away from our development, Pendra adjusted her backpack and ignored my frown. She started down the hill. Spells never worked that well for me, not even in the stories I told Mike, even if she did believe them. And it had been months since Pendra had come over. Papa was trying to buy more of the land around us in order to grow the development he'd named Riverland after the road we lived on. He was stressed out a lot. That shouldn't have mattered, but it did. We had so many new rules. The dock, Pendra's favorite place to sit, was just visible behind the house. The old wooden frame was mostly barnacles and cracking planks. Once a dinghy had bobbed beside it. I'd seen pictures. But now, as river and wind whipped together into meringue-peaked waves, the dock swayed. The leaves on the trees near the house flipped over to their silver sides. Storm's going to be here too fast, I said hopefully, catching up to her as we neared her house. If it rained, Pendra and I couldn't sit outside. We'd better wait, your house instead. But Pendra shook her head. Yours. Her elbow poked me in the side, nudging me down the hill. Mine's always a mess. Yours? Your mom waves a hand and cookies appear. My brothers are home and loud. Mike's not there to bother us. I bristled about Mike. Bothering is what little kids do. I don't mind it. You minded it this morning on the bus. You got so angry. That was low. Mike's big mouth was why Pendra was insisting on going down the hill now. She was just kidding about the house. From where I stood, the beginnings of the late fall sunset hit a second-floor window and reflected off the blue fishing float, what the locals called a witch ball, hanging on the landing. Everything in its place. Besides, no one's home. Mama had taken Mike to buy shoes after school, and a house rule was no surprise guests, especially if Mama wasn't home. I reached for excuses. Papa's working hard on the permits for the Lawton farm. Definitely no cookies to be had at the wave of a hand today. No one's at my house either. What's the difference? Pendra was impossible to refuse when she wanted something, and what she wanted right now was to brainstorm science projects at my house, preferably with cookies, where she could look for magic. Mike said, I knew what Mike had said. She'd blurted to her friend Calliope on the bus that morning, Mama's doing house magic and I get to help her. I'd kicked the back of the seat and she'd gone quiet. Calliope had shrugged it away with an, I bet you don't, and Mike hadn't replied. All better. But Pendra had heard, and she was as interested in magic as anyone. The difference, magic or no, I wanted to say now, is that your house is easy. Mine is hard. There were rules for my house Pendra didn't understand. Only my sister Mary, everyone called her Mike, except Papa, and I knew them all. Bringing Pendra home would break a rule, and rules helped the magic go. At least that's how I explained it to Mike when she was upset. No rules, no magic. No magic, everything would break and stay broken. And in our house, broken things disappeared. I crossed my arms over my fleece jacket and cupped my elbows in my hands so the fuzz warmed my palms. I rocked a little on my heels, and the road grit ground beneath the thin rubber soles of my sneakers. We can't have surprise guests, I said. It was a big rule, based on how many times Mama had said it to both Mike and me. And the difference is your house is noisy and happy even when no one's home. Mine's all creaks and groans, I finally argued. I wasn't lying. Our house was especially loud when the magic wasn't working. I wished Mike were here. Pendra and I would go to her house then, at least until dinner. Problem solved. Or else Pendra would try to drag more magic stories out of Mike. Problem not solved. But Mike wasn't here, and the temperature was falling fast. Gray clouds gained a greenish tint over the rough water. The smell of a dead fish carried almost all the way up the hill. Two gulls cut tight circles over the beach, but kept getting blown off course. And Pendra kept walking away from her house and the bus stop. Her feet aimed past the 3 houses on the hill, down to the end of the street to my house. I wasn't one bit surprised my spell didn't work. They rarely did for me, and rain wasn't enough to put Pendra off. I tried stubborn next, stopped where I was and raised an eyebrow, tilted my chin, leaning back toward Pendra's house. I tried to pull my friend that way like the fishermen we sometimes watched work the river. I cranked a bright smile. Come on, Pen, your house is closer. We can work on algorithms once we figure out the science project. I didn't want to fight, not with Pendra, not with anyone. The Sartis had moved 3 houses up from us that summer into my friend Asia's old house. It hadn't taken long for Pendra's dad and mine to get in an argument and for Pendra and me to become friends. Pendra said what she wanted. She did things and didn't worry about the consequences, like now. Her mouth curved a half smile. Her brown eyes crinkled at the corners. She turned again and continued walking down the hill past the next house toward mine. Her sneakers flashed silver in the afternoon light. My feet wouldn't move. Elle, come on. I want the Hobbit back for the weekend. You've had it too long, and if you can't take care of my books, we simply can't be friends. She was kidding. The laugh at the end said she was. Still, I grumbled, if you like paper better than people, maybe we can't be friends either. She slowed, but didn't stop. Overhead, heavy clouds pressed the sun into stormlight and made her cheeks glow. We have the sleepover at my house this weekend and the science fair. Let's not fight. Come on, Pendra said, without turning around to see if I was following. Her dark hair swung side to side as she picked up speed. We'll sit on the dock and decide our topic once and for all. What's stopping us? I pressed my lips together. Nothing was stopping us. Everything was. 4 months ago, when I'd hesitated over a pile of books at the library, Pendra had stepped up beside me at the desk. The librarian had squinted at her, said to me, "You still have 2 out, can't have these yet," and I'd felt my face heat up. "I forgot," I finally said. I hadn't, but it was a good spell, one that worked usually. Pendra had elbowed me. "You're our neighbor, right? Eleanor Prine?" I'd nodded, and she'd added my books to her own pile. "All of these, please." She deployed an enormous smile, one I learned later almost no adult could resist. The librarian shrugged. "They're your fines if she doesn't bring them back." Pendra nodded solemnly, but cut a glance at me and winked. Saved. I was so jealous someone could just do that. I kept myself from staring by grabbing my books and wrapping them in my jacket. "My dad can give you a ride home, too. It's raining," Pendra said. A second save. I couldn't let her do it. Too embarrassing. "Thanks, but I like to walk." If I drove with them, we stood a good chance of passing my dad on the road. I'd made him mad. He'd left me to walk back from the library on my own. In the rain. A lesson. If I didn't take the lesson, there might be other consequences. I squeezed out the heavy library door and down the road, starting the long walk back on the overpass sidewalk. By then, it was pouring. Halfway there, as cars roared along the highway below, the Sartis' car squeaked to a halt and the door opened. "No discussion, Eleanor," Mr. Sarti had called. "Can't let my books get wet," Pendra added. I wiped the rain off my face with the back of my hand. She'd passed me a towel, whispering, "Sorry it smells like the dogs." And then she started telling a story about riding the metro from their old apartment into the city, as I tried to sit as close to the edge of the seat as possible so I wouldn't get everything wet. I'd nearly laughed myself dry when she said everyone should take boats around Baltimore. She'd never seen Papa try to handle a boat. By the time we got back to the growing development that surrounded my house, we were friends. Pendra and I, and sometimes Mike, spent a lot of time together that summer. Our dads still growled at each other, but they let us alone. There wasn't anyone else my age in the development, not since Aja's family had moved to the other side of the highway. We'd taken advanced swim lessons together. Pendra's mom had insisted. We'd gone to the library, sweated out the slow summer days on my dock, Mrs. Sarti insisting that Pendra put on sunscreen every time Mike and I did, which Pendra thought was ridiculous. "I don't need it nearly as much as you do," she'd laughed. That had lasted until school began, until the house started needing a lot more magicking again. Then I'd found more excuses to spend time at Pendra's, sometimes with Mike along. And now Mike had let our secret slip and wasn't here to help me fix it. And this has been a preview of Riverland.